Hello, my name is Colleen Getty with The Room to Write, and today we're doing another episode of the Journey of a Story series, and we are interviewing Eddie Brophy, who is a poet, and he has 2 chapbooks and a couple of anthologies he's going to talk about. Welcome, Eddie.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. So we want to know, how does a poet write? Is there a regimented routine that you follow, or are you just writing on napkins in the cafe?
I'm probably the napkin guy. That's how I started. I started as the cocktail napkin guy at the bar, or didn't start. I started as the notebook guy in like high school with the headphones on, listening to like WFNX or some alternative album and like scribbling pictures and, writing lyrics and thinking one day I'd be the next Kurt Cobain.
Okay. And so when you say lyrics, poetry and lyrics are basically synonymous sort of, but were you thinking as a young person you were writing lyrics, or were you knowing you were actually writing poetry?
No, it was definitely lyrics. So I had written a love letter to a girl I had a crush on in 8th grade. I was rejected. She was very polite about it. She did ask to keep the love letter because she thought it was so beautifully written.
Wow.
She happened to be in a study hall with my friend Sean at the time, who played guitar and wanted to start a band. He read my letter and called me that night and said, "You need to get a bass guitar and you need to start writing lyrics and we need to start a band." I have not like an iota of musical talent in me at the time, and I had never written a lyric in my life. It was just, I was writing feelings, and it was a rough go. There was like a stack of notebooks with just some really awful my version of lyrics, and then the more I did it, the better I guess I got at it. And then I developed this thing where I would read, because I've always been really into philosophy, and always used to read like, Sigmund Freud type psychology and Friedrich Nietzsche and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And as you know, they use a lot of fancy words. So if I didn't understand a word, I would highlight it and do the dictionary.com thing and try to fit that word into my vocabulary. So in addition to all these notebooks of like doodles and drawings and album covers, what I would look like on the cover of Rolling Stone was just pages upon pages of words and definitions.
Wow.
Well, at 13, I was as neurotic as I am now at 36. I was terrified that how many different ways can you write about being rejected or being in love before it's like redundant?
Let me count the ways.
It was like, okay, well, if I like increase my vocabulary, it's almost like, a guitarist who has all the different pedals at their pedal board is just like, all right, I'll use the flanger here, the distortion here. So that's how I treated words.
Awesome. I love that. How can you spice up your rejection letters or your love letters? That's great. So speaking of neurotic, you want to introduce a few your latest and greatest anyways.
Like a goon, I grabbed the unfinished author's copy of the book. It's an erotica for the modern doomscroller. It got published on Beyond the Veil Press on Halloween of 2023. That was done very, very intentionally. Sarah, Heron, and I both share a love of the movie The Crow. I was actually supposed to do my reading of that on Devil's Night, but I have 2 little ones, and I'm divorced, so I'm a single dad. So I thought, can we push that to a Saturday? But
right. Halloween's kind of busy for parents.
Yeah, it was awesome. It's my favorite holiday, so I can now put that feather in my cap and say, I had a book come out on Halloween. So
that's awesome. So we don't usually go into like the content of the books, but give us an idea of, is there just sort of a style of poems that's in here, or if poetry is so
existential
vast.
dread. Okay. So Neurotica actually came from, I'm a giant Madonna fan. So I was listening to erotica one day taking a shower, and people tend to think my stuff's really dark. Okay. I'm like, how do I explain them? It's not dark. It's just, I'm just neurotic. Neurotica.
And you can't be that dark if you're a big Madonna fan.
Maybe a little bit. I was supposed to see her, and then she postponed, and then I got the flu, and I'm just like, I don't have time to be waiting for you to come out at 10 o'clock, so I didn't wind up going.
And that's a good point, that like the inspiration for things can come from anywhere. So
anywhere.
Was that like the beginning of you writing poems specifically for this book,
No,
or did you just compile them?
what happened from that was, we were kind of discussing off camera, was I don't have social media. I'm on Instagram only. Instagram has you upload photos and stories and stuff, but it has a text feature, not unlike Facebook or AIM or whatever. Why am I talking about AIM in 2024? And what would happen was I have certain writer friends who I chat with occasionally, and Sarah's one of them. And I was just kept sending Sarah poem after poem. And eventually they were like, Eddie, please tell me you're putting a book together. And I said, not unless you're publishing it, kind of just nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
And they had said, we offer a service where for like a fee, like I can, cobble these together for you. So when you go to another publication, maybe you'll get it. I'm like, okay, like I trust your judgment. And they didn't even make it like halfway through when I got the message saying, I don't want anyone else having these, I want these.
Okay.
And it was like, welcome to the conversation, Sarah.
So, quick question, reboot a little bit. Now, you're cranking out these poems on your phone, or are you
Typically,
writing them down?
It used to be back in the day when I was a high school kid, it was notebooks exclusively.
Right.
And now I'm a lazy adult, and I'm on my phone all the time anyway, doom scrolling, as it were, on Reddit or whatever.
Okay. And so, in between your doom scrolling, you're
just
doom writing.
Doom writing, yes. That's a good way of putting it. I'm a doom writer.
And so you'll pull those off, and then you'll so is that predominantly where all those poems came from?
Yeah,
from just sort of
one
random...
of the perks of getting a divorce is you're just broke all the time. So I didn't have a laptop, so the only way I could write would be physically on paper or on my phone. So the cover, the reason why there was a phone was because I had actually taken a text a friend sent me. But primarily because I was making a joke about the fact that that's literally where all the poems came from, was my cell phone.
That's awesome. So that was a good byproduct of doom scrolling, I
guess so. I mean,
and so all of these were written within a certain time span, or I mean.
So I started within probably all writing 50 poems in probably 2 months or so.
Wow. And so how did that process? Was there a revision process? I mean, it sounds like you were just getting them out
Sarah,
and they went.
Sarah definitely took care of that for me. They were great I'm a terrible editor, revisionist. I call it screaming into the abyss, where it's like you open a proverbial closet door and you just scream your heart out, slam the door, and you just forget about it.
Right.
So I actually had a friend read a poem that got published in there, my friend Ian, and they were like, I want to get that tattooed. I mean, that's one of the best poems. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they sent me the lines, and I'm like, oh, that's from my poem? And they're like, you might want to read your stuff, man. And I read back, I'm like, oh yeah, I did write that. Because it's one of those things that once you get it off your chest, I just forget about it. I don't like being married to anything, for obvious reasons, but.
I'm similar. I'll go to my critique group and they'll say that they like something and I won't remember writing it. So I guess that's normal then, huh?
I just assume that everyone else in the room is much smarter than me, so I tend to just be very trusting and say, you all know what you're doing. I'm just the guy doing the stream of consciousness thing.
And so for the revising, I'm just going to pull what you're saying apart a little bit.
Yeah.
You sent it to Sarah?
Sarah, yeah.
And now who's Sarah? Just
that
a random
is
friend?
the co-founder of Beyond the Veil Press.
Beyond the Veil Press. Okay, so Beyond the Veil Press is where you published this book.
Yeah.
Okay, so you sent this to her, and then between you sending it as an Instagram message and it being published, was she your actual editor, or did you have like a critique group, or what?
They were my editor. I wasn't even sending it as like a potential author. It was more or less like they're my friend, and I just, it was just one of those things where I always looked at them as just, they're the cool kid table at lunch in high school, and no matter how weird I am, I'm not weird enough to sit with those kids, but I'm not good looking or popular enough to sit with these kids, so I was always just kind of a loner.
Right.
And Sarah being trans and having this queer trans-owned independent publication, it's just, we're inclusive. Like, whoever you are, however you identify, everyone's welcome to sit at the cool kid table. And for once I was like, yeah, come on. I was like, yeah, I get to sit with the cool kids.
And so this is like just a creative circle of friends, and you've shared it, and then
at the time,
editing happened somehow, or
Sarah took care of everything for me.
Did she send it to you, and then
they would send me back. And I'm, again, even with royalties, I'm a pain in the butt, because I'm like, it's an independent press. Like, oh, do you want your $12? Not really. Go get a coffee. Pay the stat. Like, it's kind of become like, Eddie, come on, we owe you royalties. I'm like, I don't want them unless like you have like $3,000 waiting. Then we'll talk. But in the meantime, like, you're an independent press. Like, I'm just happy to be associated anyway. And
okay. And so where is this press located?
Based out of Colorado initially. Sarah just moved across to the West Coast in San Diego, so they're kind of bouncing from both areas now.
Okay, and is it just the one person that runs this whole?
No, it's a staff of 4 people.
Okay.
They're the co-founder, but yeah, they have a really nice staff over there, and a lot of really great supporters and a lot of great, I mean, I've done the virtual open mics with a lot of different writers and stuff like that, and they're all really cool people.
Yeah, and so we were talking a little bit about open mics, and even though we'll get back to your actual book, I am interested in, so there's just this, especially for poetry, I think, it can be so personal, and I feel like you're saying, screaming into the abyss, to take that, something so personal, and then have the chutzpah to stand up, and whether it's virtual or in person, sounds like you've done both. Maybe talk a little bit about, like, how do you find these places? Do you prefer virtual versus
I
in
actually
person?
prefer in person. I mean, I don't mind either way. I just enjoy the process of sharing. I mean, obviously, virtually you can't see my hands shake as much. No, I started going to a writing group in 2006 at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Melrose, right across from where the Melrose Library was. And it was primarily seniors and 19-year-old me. And I'd go in there with my little, like, you know, Eddie Vedder type ranty poems, and they loved it. They got such a kick out of it. They used to do open mics at the BB Estate. Okay. And again, it would be me and, like, my mother's now retired, like, debate teacher from Melrose High, and then his sons who remembered my dad and my aunts, and then just a whole melting pot of different people. And Jackie Wattenberg, who ran the group, she was a Juilliard grad. She was actually at one point trying to give me singing lessons, which did not go very well.
To go with your guitar lessons.
Yeah, but we were very close, and I done the writing group with her, and then eventually I kind of wanted, with all due respect, I kind of wanted to find, like, my age group, which was tough. I tried Gulu Gulu in Salem, which is primarily a lot of rowdy college kids with acoustic guitars trying to impress the opposite sex or the same, with whoever they're trying to impress, whoever with their not so great lyrics. Coldplay covers, or, you know, just total cacophony in a microphone.
So that was an open mic that was not just poetry, it was all different.
It was, I didn't know that. I hear open mic and I'm like, oh, poetry. And then I go there, I'm like, that guy's screaming into a microphone over distortion pedal. And then
but that's good to know, right? Yeah. So if somebody sees open mic, that doesn't necessarily mean it's only poetry.
It's good to know, because I remember there was, like, this really, it opened with this really, like, accomplished, like, guitarist.
Right.
And someone had nudged me and be like, this doesn't feel like an open mic night. And then the guy with the box and the microphone they screamed into, the guy that was hosting turned to me and goes, now it's an open mic night. And I was just like, okay, good to know.
Right. But okay, so Gulu, you've gone to others, and then any other ones that you want to talk about?
White Lamb Books has a great one. The crowd was young, older. It was they were just really like-minded people, like a lot of the similar ideologies, politically, socially, what have you. But just a really nice, I can't remember the woman's name off the top of my head, but she was such a sweetheart. Like, wanted to talk to me about my horror novel that came out, and then she was like, well, we got to focus on poetry, but I'm going to ask you about that next time I see you. And then, of course, I haven't been able to go back because I got my kids on the nights that they always have them.
So, and you've been to a few of those at White Lamb?
Just the one.
Okay. Because I've heard those have been going
really
well.
nice, a really great environment, really nice.
Yeah. So, and I have to give you credit, because Eddie, that takes a lot to get up there and, you know, read. So I don't know if you want to talk to people a little bit about, not only is it hard enough, especially for introverts, which often writers are introverts, or at least that personality of them is an introvert, of not only getting your words onto even just a page and sending that to the greater world, but actually standing up and saying those words. Basically you're publishing it out loud, right? Yeah. So what's the difference in feeling and, like, what you're getting back as the writer when you got your book out there, and then also compared to when you stand up and you own those words that you wrote?
It's much more intimate when I've done, so when my novel came out and I had to do, like, the virtual Zoom reading for that, and anytime I've done, like, an Instagram live thing with someone, or, like, a remote interview or something like that, it's a lot harder to, like, kind of just, like, you can kind of hide in your writing. You can't hide when you're behind a microphone or you're behind a camera. So it takes a certain amount of, I'd say, bravery, but also stupidity to just be like, I can do this. And, like,
vulnerability.
Yeah, I can be vulnerable, I think, with me. There's a silliness to what I do, because the stuff I do can be so heavy and so existential and so dark. And these are words I don't use for myself. They've just been said to me, like, oh, I had someone tell me they had to put down my novel and said it was way too disturbing, which 5th grade me would have been like, victory, like, I did it, I've made it.
Right.
It's different because, you know, when you're writing, you're kind of in your own little space, your own little bubble. And when you're in front of total strangers, it's like, oh man, if I get rejected or if they don't like it, I'm going to feel so stupid. And
Right.
I mean, I was 24, 25 in community college and writing classes with like 18, 19-year-old kids. So like that kind of like hardened me in terms of like, I feel like Billy Madison right now. And like these kids are looking at me like, it's like this guy wants to write. Yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, I do. Like,
Right, they might be there because they feel like they have to be, and you want to be there
Yeah.
writing, and that is a thing, right? Like that's why open mics and meet and greets and any sort of community building thing for writers is so important because it isn't always, everyone's not always like, I love to read, I love to write.
Right.
But when you get together with people that do, it feels really good. So maybe through your publication and through open mic, is that maybe a way that you've been able to create a community around you? Because it's sort of a stepping stone
I'm
to
still
getting to
looking
know
for
writers.
that community. I mean, that's one of the things with a lot of friends I have. Like, I have a friend, Florence, who is out in Allentown, Pennsylvania. They have a phenomenal community. They were actually
In
doing,
person or online?
in person over
Okay.
there in They just did I think it was called Poetry Palooza. They participated in, and I get so jealous. Even Sarah, a great community. I'm like, I kind of just, I'm like the kid in high school that I don't have a clique. Like I'm just kind of
Right.
actively going from place to place. Like I've been to Starbucks in Beverly. Meetup.com I think it was, but it's like someone's like back in like 2009. Like, oh hey, try Meetup.com, see if you can find writers. You'd start at a Starbucks with like 4 or 5 people, and then you go the second time, it's just you and the main person that
Right.
hosted it. Or
And what is that? What's with that? Like,
I
what do you
thi-
think happens?
honestly, I think it comes down to probably time. And the one thing that came up at White Lamb a lot was people who were just trying to find the time to write.
Right.
And I used to have that problem, weirdly, before I had kids. And strangely, I have kids now, and I don't have that problem. It's kids are in bed. Like I think that's why I prefer poetry over writing novels, because it's a very quick process. Whereas a novel is just kind of a knock down, drag out. Like you have to be married to this thing for however long until it's
Right. And so have you written a novel? I
Yeah.
thought you mentioned.
done. Yeah. So that was nothing is going to get nostalgic about. This is my award-winning horror novel from 2020.
Oh, okay. So that's the one you said somebody put down because it was so disturbed.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All right. So, so you're not just short form. What made you do a novel?
Because I had the story for years. So initially, you know, not to take up too much time, but
Yeah.
it was written about my childhood. So I moved from Melrose to Stoneham in 1994. The house we moved into was supposedly haunted.
Ew.
Allegedly, a little boy had died in the woods next to the house and was buried somewhere in the house.
Wow.
I can't quite, you know, elaborate too much, but it was a fictitious account of stuff that had happened from 94 to like 98. And some of it was based off actual stories. Like my sisters in 95 thought it'd be a smart idea to play with Ouija boards and, you know, try to have seances to bring Kurt Cobain and Elvis Presley back. So, and we did have
Cobain.
very scary, very peculiar incidents happen with the little boy in the house who apparently
Right.
looked just like me.
Wow.
And was waking my mom up in the middle of the night. She'd be like, oh, Eddie, let's bring you back to bed. And walked this kid down the hallway, went to open my door, and there I am sleeping in the bed.
Wow. And so that was more than could be in a poem.
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
mean, so that's basically.
Again, I grew up loving like tortured poets and writers, and you know, again, Leonard Cohen. I love Dylan Thomas. That's actually how my son got his name. He was born on World Poetry Day too, so obviously he's going to grow up to be like a football player now.
So is your novel very lyrical? I mean, does it feel poetic, or were you able to just have a totally different?
I just have a totally different voice, I think, because I grew up loving horror movies and just all things scary. So
Right.
that was like, I joke to people that like I got to be these two things. I got to be John Carpenter and Kurt Cobain, and that felt kind of, or Layne Staley and, you know, Stephen King, and that felt kind of cool.
And would you ever do another novel?
I did, yeah. I finished
Oh,
two
okay.
novels. Actually, I wrote one right before my divorce. I'd written a novel in like 2 months, and then I wrote another horror novel about, I think, a year or two ago. And it just, the process of trying to find like a literary agent is
Yeah.
so daunting at times that it was like, I kind of feel like Jim Carrey in Liar Liar when he's just like scared. And when someone's like, tell me what your book's about, and you're like,
I know, that's very
I don't
hard.
even know. Like, how do I
Right.
put this? So, like, just you read it. You tell me what it's about, because
Right.
you're gonna sell it better than I could.
So was this novel traditionally or self-published?
It was, I guess, traditional. I mean, I went through Atmosphere Press. I'd found them
Okay.
through Submittable. You pay them to publish it, but then you get everything that you probably wouldn't get if you self-publish in terms of like press and an artist to do your cover, and you get a team like proofreaders, stuff like that. So
Okay.
I'm really bad at this.
And you're the second person I've talked to
Yeah.
that has gone through Atmosphere Press.
And they're awesome. I had an absolute amazing experience with them.
And how did you find them? Like, what was that process?
They were on Submittable. They were
and
looking.
what is submittable? I
So
guess
that's a
is another
website
question.
where it's basically if you're looking for places to submit photography, art, poetry, short stories, stuff like that. There's a category, and it's a list of publications that are online, and
Okay.
some of them are print, or some of them are online and print. Some of them are just online. I mean, I've done a few. Most of my poetry's probably been published online versus in traditional print form. So
Okay. And most of that has been through Submittable?
yeah.
Okay, so that's a great resource for people that, because we were talking a little bit earlier how, especially as a poet or a short form writer, and you're looking at magazines and things to try to publish in, it's overwhelming.
Oh, I try not to be too old school, but I still encourage people, like, go to your local bookstores, and if they carry, like, literary trade magazines, or, like, I know Writer's Digest, you have the really big, like, $40, $50, like, index of, like, these are all the different
Right.
literary agents and publishers and magazines and stuff like that. I still encourage that.
Okay. And you've found some of the places through that? Or?
Yeah, I went that route, too. You know,
Okay.
as a really destitute 18, 19-year-old kid staining wood furniture, making like barely $200 a week, and just going to Barnes & Noble, like, all right, scrape together $50, let's get the book, and just like being so determined and wasting so much money on people don't know how good you have it now.
Right. Not
I
having
could have
paid for the
plastered my
stamp.
home with all the rejections, and then the angry, like, "Hey, next time include this much postage with the thing we're going to reject." So.
Oops. Yeah, right. I didn't even think of that. Yeah. So now it's email. You get a nice, easy rejection for free. So going back a little bit to your doom scrolling I forget what.
Neurotica for the modern doom scroll. I did not make it easy for anybody.
No. You got all your poems together. What was the length of time? Like, what's the process from when you got sort of a final draft and then you were able to get your hands on it?
Almost like 6 months or so, because I forget when we initially, I want to say it might have been like this time last year when I signed the contract, and it was like, you know, the formality thing, Eddie, we got to get you to sign this, and da-da-da. I'm like, oh, that's fine. And because I remember the last poem of the book I had written in a hotel room. I had taken my kids to Danvers to go to a horror movie convention, because that's what you do with a 4 and 6-year-old. And ironically, and pretty messed up, we had actually gotten, the room we got was the room that my now ex-wife and I had on our wedding night.
Oh, wow.
So I got up there and was just full of so much PTSD, and like my kids are sleeping, I'm just sitting there like, well, this is cruel fate. And I had the song by the Motels, Only the Lonely, just playing in my head. And for whatever reason, I'm like, okay, I'm going to write something. I wrote it like almost like a direct conversation to Sarah, and sent it to them. And the name of the poem was In the Hotel Room, and they were just like, done. This is how you end it. This is how we're
Okay.
gonna end
Oh,
it.
so that was the last poem.
That was the last poem, and they edited it because they're like, I don't like the way you ended it. It seemed like too down, like, and they had managed to flip it where it's like, now it's way more hopeful, and that's how this book should
So that's
end.
a good question. You know, people think of a novel as sort of like beginning, middle, end. There's a climax. There's a plot line. Poetry, I think of as sort of more free flowing. It's just a collection. But did you have to put thought into how the order poems came in? And when you're saying that it seemed unfinished, is that a thing for poetry?
If I'd given Sarah an assignment at all, I was determined, because I was such a fanatic of like alternative music growing up, that I was determined I wanted to write my Downward Spiral by 9 Inch Nails.
Okay.
I said, I don't care how whatever format you think this works, like when I read it, I want to picture this is Eddie Brophy's version of the Downward Spiral. And that's why they loved that last poem. So like, Eddie, you wrote Your Hurt, this is perfect. I'm like,
okay.
I'm good, I could co-sign that.
Yeah, so it's nice to have sort of a format.
I don't normally do it. I'm very just a stream of consciousness. I don't try to overthink the process.
Right.
In fact, I try to do the opposite, because if you give me like a theme, like I just submitted a poem to Flint Memorial Library in North Reading for their poetry contest, and the theme was like space. I'm like, oh, I'm so bad with themes, because you give me like an instruction, like, Eddie, write it like this. I get so in my head, I'm like a dog chasing its own
Right.
tail. I'm like, I can't get anything done, but I managed to hopefully get it. I was told I was the first one to submit to the contest. I'm like,
Okay.
hopefully-
Overachiever. And it must be said that you also participated in this month in April, the Arts Collaborative of Wakefield did a collaboration with The Room to Write, and where artists put their work out there for writers to be inspired by and write a piece. And you have a piece in that exhibit this month. What was that like? Since you're saying, it is hard to kind of go towards a format. How was that for you?
Nerve-wracking because I knew we were going to do this show, and I was like, oh, well, Colleen had said, you should really try it. And I'm like, all right, I want Colleen to actually like me. But it was the piece of art I saw, and it just immediately, like, I tried to do what the instruction was, like, you don't necessarily write about the piece, but write something that might fit it somehow. And I'm like, I'm a Marvel fan. Like, it's Gamora, come on. Like, I grew up with mostly women. Like, I'm just going to write a feminist as hell poem right now and just call it a day. And I was proud. I remember.
So did you like that process? Was it a good prompt?
That was one of the few times I actually did enjoy that process, where it was like, I just saw something, I'm like, all right, this will be easy, because I've already, at that moment, I'd already kind of had like the nuts and bolts in my head of like, this is probably how this will come out.
Right.
And I've also, at 36, divorced, single, dad losing his mind all the time, broke, like, I'm just like, I don't care, this sucks, I don't care, I finished a thought.
Right.
I developed.
But sometimes you do have to just release yourself from it, right?
By the ball chain necklace that's terribly outdated. I am a Goo Goo Dolls fan, so I have a very Johnny Resnick, like I don't care anymore, I'm just doing this.
Right. And you keep coming back to like music and poetry, and I know everyone comes at writing and poetry differently, but I can't ignore, and obviously you can't, the connection between writing and music.
Well, poetry by nature, I think it's very musical.
Yeah, and so when you did do your band or whatever, did you find you could just write, or did you have to listen to the music and then write to the music?
It depends who. If I was writing the songs, they kind of just went hand in hand for the most part. That's in a bunch of the bands. That's how it went. There was one band where it was other guys writing the music, so I'd have to sit with like a notepad and like the demo they were working on and like really. And it was fun. It was a challenge. It was fun. I personally, I'm just so used to being 18 or 19 at the time, like sitting in your bedroom and like chain smoking and just going through and like, oh, that's a good chord, and just kind of doing it yourself. But
right. Okay. Yeah, because I mean, I'm thinking this fella that said you need to join our band saw your writing, and it almost seemed like he would write the music to match that because he was already sold on the words that you gave him.
Even though I couldn't sing to save my life, it was basically like, Eddie, here's a riff, like figure it out, man. It was just like, okay, and like people would play me things and I would try to arrange them, and
right.
I not the most musically inclined person, but like kind of had the mind of like a producer in a way of just like I try to assemble things and like, oh, this sounds better here, this sounds, and sometimes even with poetry, it's like I'll come up with a title and like, that's a great title, and I'll try to assemble the lines accordingly.
Okay, so I guess that's a good question. Do you always come up with the title first, or do you write it and then come up with the title?
It depends. Sometimes the title's so good or ridiculous that the poem follows. Sometimes the title kind of cripples the poem, and then other times it's just, you come up, like I wrote one in that book, Neurotica, about my son, my youngest son, one night turned to me and said, I love you all the time. And you love me all the time, and I love you all the time. That's the name of this poem, and it was just basically about a poem about my kids. So.
Right. Free verse, rhyme, any format types?
I had to get the, kind of like when I went to broadcasting school, and I had to get the as beat out of me, because it's just not a comfortable thing to listen to, especially if you want to work in broadcasting.
Right.
In grad school through Southern Hampshire University, I had a professor who absolutely like just beat the rhyming out of me. It was like, you can do it occasionally, but clearly you were a lyricist because everything rhymes. It's making me mental. So now
okay, right, because if you did music, then a lot of times that is part of it, huh?
So I got it beat out of me, but a lot of my earlier stuff, everything rhymes. And it's like trying to find like the most ridiculous words to rhyme, like ostentatious, sordid, repudiate. It's like, it's like, how are you making these words rhyme with other words like this? It's just,
right. So no rhymes anymore.
Some here and there.
Okay.
Old habits die hard.
Okay. So just circling around to, you've gotten the book in your hand. What do you do with the it's not a picture book where you can go do readings. What do you do after you get this poetry book published?
If you're like me, it's you try to lean very heavily on the one social media page you have. I mean, I've reached out to libraries. I've donated copies of my novel to libraries. I've gone to open mics and tried to, but really, I'm just the worst salesperson on the planet. So it's just one of those things where it's like, it's out, it exists. Like, here you go, guys. This is where to find it. But I'm so
Right.
bad. Like, I kind of, sort of had a website, and then I just gave up. I'm like, this is too much work. I don't know what I'm
Right.
doing.
So for somebody, an author that does not want to get into the website, your go-to is Instagram, and it seems like that's sort of the majority of what
You know,
people are-
if you're good with any kind of social media, if you're good with like YouTube, like get inventive, have some ingenuity with it. I mean, there's stuff that other people feel much more comfortable with than I do. My lanky, scrawny, 120-pound butt is not going on TikTok trying to do like, you know what I mean?
poem dances.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be like reading poems and stuff, but like, I mean, if that's your thing, if that's your jam, like.
I guess that would be a good
Get
format,
creative
huh,
with
for a
it.
short format
There's
for poetry.
no right or wrong way to do it. It's basically like anything else in life. Don't compare yourself to other people because no two people got to the same place the same way. So
Right.
it's, just have fun with it. And if you're not having fun, there's no point in doing it because it doesn't pay very well, folks.
Right. That's a resounding theme that always comes up. This is not a full-time job.
No, it's,
but
and again, even if you turn into a full-time job, like the second you resent doing it, then why did you try? Because I mean,
Right.
the whole point of doing anything you love is because you love it, and it gives you something that a lot of other things in life don't give you. So.
And I usually end by asking for a piece of advice, and I still can, but I feel like you just gave it to us.
I mean, the best piece of advice I could give anyone, and trust me, don't ask me for advice. I wouldn't even take it. In this one instance, I would. Is just if you love it, don't quit on it. I mean, I could pull up my Submittable account because they keep track of all your rejections and all your.
Okay.
I think out of like 500, and this is since dating back to like 2012, 13. I think I have over like 400 rejections and like 10 yeses. So.
Wow.
It's one of those things.
But you
where
get 10 yeses.
Yeah, it's all matters. It's all matters, man. So if
That's
you really
awesome.
love it, stick with it.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Eddie.
you for
Thanks for
having
coming
me.
in and
Absolutely.
representing poetry, one of my favorite forms of writing.
I'm sorry I am for you. Then.
It's the best. It is. We're gonna get everybody to love it eventually. But thank you so much for sharing
having me.
about your book, and good luck. And maybe we'll see you at an open mic sometime soon. I gotta get myself to one of those. And if anybody else would like to come and chat with us about your journey from idea to publication, please feel free to get in touch at theroomtowrite.org. Thanks again.
Thank you.